John, we're at that point of the season where I think we need some summation and ability to project forward, and I don't think we could have a much better guest than our friend Ken Rosenthal.
Right. If we put one of our competitors on, we know that we love him. So Ken Rosenthal is great. Nobody works harder than him. Nobody does a better job than him. And really looking forward to talking to Ken again today.
John, at worst, you're a close second for people who work hard in this industry, but we love having Ken on. John and I are going to do a deep dive on where the Mets and Yankees are right now, both in this moment, the Lindor injury, Judge sizzling again, and how it all projects forward. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. John, since we last talked to each other on this show, the Yankees and Mets have both got healthier in a lot of different ways, except for unhealthier with Francisco Lindor. That's not good news for the Mets, but in the standings, they've gone two up. They're, as we're speaking, a season high tying 15 games over 500. They're two up on the Braves. They're tied with Arizona for the second wild card. I looked at this morning. Where was it? They're 2.5 behind the Padres, who are 3.5 behind the Dodgers, and actually have three left with the Dodgers this year. It would be really something if at some point the Mets and the Dodgers were playing in a playoff series. So there's a lot still at play, from not making the playoffs to a lot of different places they could finish. John, they're in a dominant position, but those three games in their torture chamber in Atlanta loom next week. I'll be there. What do you think about where the Mets are right now?
Yeah, I think they're in great position. I mean, I really do. You got to feel good about it. I mean, Lindor injury is concerning, but look at the Braves and all their injuries. If the Braves make it, I give them credit. With all the injuries they've had, underperformance by Olson, by Riley, by the catchers, it's stunning. Obviously, Chris Sale's been fantastic. Their pitching is generally excellent. But the Mets seem like the better team. They are the healthier team. And if they don't make it, I'm going to be very, very surprised at this point.
Yeah, the Braves just feel like they've run out of players in some way. And even now, the Diamondbacks at this time of year to go into with Colorado and lose two games to the Rockies at this time of year isn't good. They've opened themselves up. They've lost a little contact with the Padres to try to get that number one wild card seed. And now the Mets are tied with them. Look, it's hard to ignore the Mets. No one feels sorry for you. Certainly, no one feels sorry for the Braves or anyone who's dealing with so many injuries in the sport right now. But Francisco Lindor is probably the Mets' best offensive player. He's probably their best defensive player. He's probably their headiest player. He's probably their most important player in the clubhouse. And he's still in the clubhouse. I was there last night. But this back injury, John, I know they're kind of like it could be a couple of days. I was there last night. Sometimes you're in places and you're reading between lines. It's a back. I think they might have to, what's going to be fascinating is the give up trade with Scherzer last year going to help them now? Because Luis
Right.
Angel Acuna really played, even with an error in the game last
Yeah.
night, had, I think, three hits. He made a couple of more good plays. One of the hits was his first career homer. He seems to be he's not a very big guy, but he seems to
Oh,
be a very easy athlete. The
yeah.
ball comes out of his hand easy. The ball comes off of his bat easy. John, surviving Francisco Lindor.
Yeah, I mean, they said like 2 to 5 days when he was first diagnosed, and they were happy that the MRI was clean, but that seemed optimistic. Certainly a back is a very tricky thing. He is a quick healer. They have quick healers on that team with him and Alonso leading the way, but it is definitely concerning. I mean, Acuna Jr., you never know. You never know. Acuna, he may end up being really good. The reports were outstanding when they got him. He has not hit this year. He had about a 650 OPS. I know a lot of my older followers are going to complain that I use OPS. I think that's a pretty good number. And, if he's great defensively, I think that's really what they will be happy with right now. Iglesias obviously was a great shortstop when he came up. He's got great hands. He's a good second baseman now. He could do it if they need him to do it. So I think they're pretty well covered considering their best player is out at the moment.
Yeah, the feel of it all, John, that the Acuna in the Met Brave series, who's playing, is going to be on the Mets and is going to be
Yeah.
vital to the end, because he's the MVP, the reigning NL MVP, Ronald Acuna Jr.'s younger brother. Look, the Mets held a team meeting before Monday's game. It was impromptu. David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza felt that it was necessary to talk to the team. Now, again, what I heard was this was before the MRI results came in, and I think that even Mendoza didn't hide how dire he thought this was because, Lindor essentially had to pull himself from the game again. The MRI results were supposedly better, but they did hold this meeting. Three people spoke: the president of baseball operations, the manager, and Pete Alonso. John, Pete Alonso's message to the team was, I've been here 6 years. We were kind of fake contenders in 2019. We never got to celebrate in 2022 because we were winning the division so long, got caught in the end. And so we kind of ended up the wild card. So we didn't celebrate and then got eliminated by the Padres. And he said, I didn't sniff the playoffs in any other year. And his message was, I want to celebrate with the boys. Like the guys who've gone through this trip with him, the Nimos, the Lindors, etc., some of the people in the coaches. It was interesting that Pete Alonso, in what could be his final homestand as a New York Met, decided to stand up and talk.
Yeah, well, good for him. I mean, he certainly is a guy who wants to win. Not that most of them don't, but you can see it in him that he really wants to win. And he had a big game. And usually, I'm not a big meeting guy. I mean, I will say from this meeting, you were there, I was not, but it's a little bit alarming that they held a meeting. David Stearns is not usually involved in the clubhouse, which is the right way to go. The GM should not be around, and Cashman's not around at all either. Should be the manager's purview. There's no question about that. But the fact that he held a meeting kind of is, to me, a signal that they were concerned that this is a pretty dire situation. I'm glad that the MRI came out great, but if Lindor's not playing, he's hurting. That's what I think.
Yeah, look, John, I agree with you again. Even if it was you did this before the MRI result, it was a sign of this. And John, what I think it's a sign of, and you know this because you're in the clubhouse so much, you're such an observant guy, is like, I mean, MetLife does revolve around Francisco Lindor in a lot of ways, and I think that they felt it was important to just talk about this because it wasn't just like if they lost Alonso, I'm not sure they would have had that meeting. If they lost Nimmo, I'm not sure they would have had that meeting. I think it is a Lindor specific meeting because of how much he means to the team, and he's such a strong MVP contender besides everything else. And I'm sure this will probably cost them that chance to get the MVP because a strong finish would have given him some narrative against Ohtani. John, on the flip side, the Yankee MVP candidate, Aaron Judge, is sizzling again. He's going to put up incredible numbers once again. Him and Bobby Witt will be an interesting decision. And so why don't I frame where the Yankees are right now, which is, as we're speaking, four
Okay,
up
great.
with 11
Yeah,
to play. The Orioles are in a complete reel. They're lucky. Some of the other wild card teams have also kind of fallen apart. So they're in this situation. The Yankees have the best record in the league. They're up 1.5 on Cleveland, but they own the tiebreaker over the Guardians. So the Guardians would have to finish with a better record than them. So the American League playoffs with a week and a half left looks like it's going to go through the Bronx. The Yankees are going to get a bye. To me, John, they haven't been this healthy all year, especially their pitching is so healthy with Schmidt and Heel and Hamilton, who's a key guy coming back. Judge is rolling again. Soto's rolling again. Is it more World Series or bust than ever before with the situation they are in an American League that is really down this year?
yeah, it's so positive right now. I mean, they're going to have to be Houston again. I mean, I hate to bring it up, but that's the team right now. The Orioles they look dead in the water right now. I mean, they've got so many pitching injuries. They're not playing well. What happened to Adley Rutschman? I mean, we praise the Orioles up and down for their picks, but I mean, they probably should have picked Bobby Witt Jr. there. You can't kill him for picking the switch hitting catcher who's been really good and an all-star, but he's not Bobby Witt Jr., and he's really not performing well at all right now. And, I'm going to be shocked if they get through and they're the team. I think everybody's going to be shocked if it's the Guardians, and give them credit for being where they are. the Astros to me look like the biggest threat. They had all these pitching injuries to begin with, right? They had 8 guys who were starters go on the IL. And right now their rotation looks as good as anybody's except maybe the Yankees. Right now, I'm with you. The Yankees look great. They're healthy. They have 6 viable starting pitching candidates. I would say Cortez and Stroman, they seem to have signaled or would be the odd men out. And I probably would agree with that based on, unless they need another lefty for Cortez. Heel is obviously going to be a major factor. Say what you want. He didn't have a command. He didn't have this. Every game, it's 6 innings and 1 run. So their question is the bullpen. That's right now the Achilles heel. You got to wonder exactly. I think it's decent, but it's not shut down. They don't have Clase, obviously. I'd go with Weaver. We'll see. They have a number of good relievers out there, but no Mariano Rivera, no Clase, nobody like that. That's the question. Health is good. The starting is good. The lineup, fantastic. Soto and Judge are hitting big time now, and they look great.
Yeah, John, there's a lot there to unbundle. I always caution if you go back and look at what Arizona and Texas did over like the last 2 months, 6 weeks of the season last year, they were terrible, both of those teams, and they end up in the World Series. There is still this reset that happens in the playoffs. We are still answering the question, do you rest or rust when you get those 4 or 5 days off, like the Yankees look like they're going to get the top 2 seeds, get those 4 or 5 days? Of course you want them. Nobody wants to be in the danger of a best 2 out of 3. You earn the right to get that rest, and you hope it doesn't turn to rust. John, why don't we drill down on a little bit? Is like to me, Weaver's been great. I think he's earned the right to believe that he's going to be an attack dog in the playoffs, and he's going to go where the big outs are needed. Is that the 6th inning to get 3 outs or 6 outs? Is that the 8th inning? Is that the 8th and 9th inning? I think he's going to do it. And they have a lot of pitchers pitching well. Tommy Kahnle isn't, my favorite flavor at Baskin Robbins, but he's pitching really well. Jake Cousins is generally pitched very well. I think Tim Hill is there for the fight. I don't think that guy has any fear in him whatsoever. And
everybody leaves the White Sox and becomes
yes.
a great pitcher, right? I mean, Kopech, it's unbelievable.
Well, the Yankees got 3. Hill, Cousins, and Hamilton are all failed White Sox guys who've been really good for the Yankees, and not to mention Hamilton's been good. I do think Cortez ends up being an important reliever for them if they're going to win. Because, John,
he's got courage. He's got big courage. He wants to go for it.
Yes.
I mean, yes.
I'm with you.
I think because I'm eliminating him as a starter, it's not a reflection on him. They have 4 excellent starters. I think Schmidt's stuff is almost as great as his confidence. Heel is outstanding talent. Obviously, it's going to be Cole and Rodon. So, you've got 4 guys. It's not a reflection on Cortez. I think he'll get big outs. And I think he wants the moment. And, they're in good shape, other than the fact they don't have really. I mean, Weaver's going great, but he's not an established superstar reliever like they've had for all those championships, right? He's certainly not, as I said, Clase or.
But I also think it means they don't get locked into down deep. We don't really want Aroldis Chapman pitching in this moment, but it's his moment. I think that if Boone's got to have feel this October, John, and I think that means, I keep talking about them playing American Legion ball, which is, Cole gets a little rope, though the last time he had rope, he hung himself pretty well against the Red Sox. But I think Cole gets roped because he's Cole. He's possibly the best pitcher on the planet. And then I think everyone else is, how are you throwing? And I think if it means you're closing with Weaver one night and you're closing with Nestor Cortez another night, because I'm just there with you, John. I think October, part of it is about who's fearless, who wants the moment. More important, who's not afraid. I always thought what was great about Jeter and Rivera, they just weren't afraid of the moment. Now, of course, they're top 1% talent. But we've seen a lot of top 1% talent kind of collapse at that time of year. I thought those guys didn't because they were like, hey, man, this is what I dreamed about doing as a little kid. I'm not getting scared about it right now. I love this moment. And I think Cortez loves the competition.
Right? Yeah, Duque was like that as well.
Great, yes.
But I think you said it. I think it's Boone's moment. It's Boone. They're going to want to keep Boone no matter what happens. They're going to say, we want to keep Boone. But if they don't get at least to the championship series and maybe even beyond, the fans are going to have an outcry because it's going to be 7 years of not making it to the World Series for him, 15 for the team. But yeah, I think it's going to be quite a hot topic. And if they get to the LCS, I think they're certainly going to want to keep them and probably will. But if they
Can't
don't,
keep losing to the Astros though. If that I
yeah,
look,
if they get
John,
to the LCS and lose to the Astros, yeah, that's going to be quite something. That's the Weather Boone, because they're going to want to keep them no matter what. If they play like the Dodgers did last year in the playoffs and go out terribly, they're going to, they love him, right? Cashman
yes.
and Steinbrenner love him. They're not going to want to say it's him.
Yep.
Um,
But he's going to have John, I'm with you. I understand that personality and relationships matter a lot here. And Hal Steinbrenner clearly has strong ties and affection for Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone. But this team feels like a team that needs to be managed. I have found it interesting that Volpe has, like, for example, gotten some days off late here this year. Is that a sign of anything about against a tough righty in the playoffs? I wonder if he should be defending for Gleyber Torres late in games, which he hasn't done yet with somebody like Cabrera or Birdie. And yes, and I think a lot of this just comes down to feel for pitching, and it can't be. I decided what the lane was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You got to feel the moment in the game. You got to tell your analytics guys, thanks for the information. I'll use it as best as possible. But if you haven't noticed, I'm the grandchild of a major leaguer. I'm the child of a major leaguer.
yeah,
I'm a brother of a major leaguer. And by the way, I was a major leaguer, and this is my 7th year managing.
yeah,
And I think he is on of all the Yankees. Soto could go 0 for October, John. He's going to give the floor is 500 million, right? He goes 0 for
yeah,
October. Boone is on the hot seat a little bit, and with all that
yeah. Not a little
Steinbrenner,
bit. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
with as much,
I think
he can't just have bad moments where he doesn't feel the game.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think they're the favorite in their league. They should be, right? The only reason the Astros would be favored is because of the fact that they've beaten the Yankees so many times recently. That's not a great reason, right? So they're the favorite. He's going to have to feel his way through on that bullpen. And by the way, I know what you're saying because you think about everything. Gleyber is not coming out for anything. I'll be shocked if he
I
comes out.
know.
He loves Gleyber. He made him the leadoff hitter when he was hitting about 230, right? So
Yeah.
he loves
He made
Glaber.
him the leadoff hitter a day after I asked him about why don't you lead off Gleyber Torres, and he gave me a bunch of reasons why Gleyber wasn't the leadoff hitter, and then he led Gleyber off the next
Well,
day.
maybe you
But
gave him the idea. I don't know.
maybe I should.
Maybe I'm not.
I'll take a piece of his contract over my whole one. Look, I'm sure we're gonna talk about Yankees, Mets, MVP races, and more with our friend, the great Ken Rosenthal, who joins us next on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. Well, the goal today was to find somebody with more jobs than John and I have, and somehow works harder than both of us. I don't know how that happens, especially John. But Fox, which has the Mets and Phillies on Thursday night, The Athletic, where his work is always brilliant, and his webcast, Fair Territory. Our friend Ken Rosenthal. Ken, thanks so much for joining us on the show. And Ken, I think you know me well enough. You're our guest. I want to open up with a softball. American League MVP. Um, uh, Look, it's going to be a tough call here. Clearly, this has come down to Kansas City's Bobby Witt Jr. and the Yankees' Aaron Judge. And one of the things I just want to say right away is I don't want to hear from Kansas City fans or New York fans because if Bobby Witt was the shortstop on the Yankees and Aaron Judge was the center fielder on the Royals, you people would vote a different way. I want to hear some unbiased thoughts. Ken, it's your floor. Go.
Joe, it's extremely difficult. And we had a good talk, you and I, at Yankee Stadium the other day. Got me thinking. I still lean toward Judge, and I lean toward Judge because as of this morning, it's 70 points and on base that he's up on Witt, and it's nearly 100 points of slugging. Now, Witt Jr. obviously is the better defender and better base runner. We all know that, and it's an almost apples and oranges comparison because there's such different players. But most valuable is the question here. And I don't think there is a wrong answer, to be perfectly honest. And to address the people in New York and Kansas City, if someone votes for Witt Jr., that's fine. If someone votes for Judge, that's fine. I just lean toward Judge because, as has been pointed out by a number of people, when you look at OPS plus, weighted runs created plus, those advanced metrics. This is one of the top 20 seasons that he is putting together in American League National League history. It's tough for me to go against that, but I've seen Witt Jr. too, and I've seen him do remarkable things. You guys saw him just last week at Yankee Stadium, and he is something else. There's no question about that. So to me, it's almost a toss-up, but right now I lean a little bit toward Judge.
John, can I just the thing Ken and I were talking about on the field, I threw out. I just want to throw it out here
Yes.
because it's the way. Again, I don't know who it is right now. I think it's probably Judge, but I just want to say right now it's a 30-8 advantage, say in stolen bases. That's 22 extra bases there. It's a 20-4 difference, 22-4 difference in double plays. That's 18 extra. Add 18 hits to Witt or take away 18 from Judge, where you could begin to collapse the slugging of the OBP. Plus, there is no Soto in the Royals lineup to give him leeway. I don't know. I was making a case to Ken at Yankee Stadium, ironically, about Judge. I'm sorry, about Witt. I'm not sure Witt's the MVP. It could be Judge, but that's just the conversation we were having and why I brought it up again here.
And the other thing I think that's worth mentioning, guys, and Joel, you kind of touched on this when we were talking at Yankee Stadium. Judge in center field. Okay, the metrics aren't great. We know that. But a couple of things there. One, it has been important for his team for him to be in center field. It enables them to align their outfield the way they want to, with Soto in right and Verdugo in left. And the other thing about the metrics with him, you guys watch him more live than I do. You guys watch him more period than I do. I don't get the sense. I have not seen plays where I've been like, oh my gosh, he's killing it. I don't know that he's cost them a game out there. So the defensive hit that he's taking in WAR and maybe in our minds, I don't know that that's that big a deal. So all of these things go into the big stew here in deciding who to vote for. And again, it's really close. And yes, Bobby Witt Jr. does not have anything close to a Juan Soto. Even when Pasquantino was healthy, no. Sal Perez, no, it's not the same. So you can weigh that in too, but it's just one of those calls that's a lot of fun to talk about, honestly, but it's going to cause a lot of polarization in the two cities we're talking about in particular.
Yeah, I'm with you. There isn't a wrong answer as long as you answer Judge or Witt Jr. I've seen people throw out some other names. Those are the two names. And on talking about both on defense, you're right. Judge has been fine in center. He's doing it for the team. Center is a premium position. I give him credit. I'm not deducting him if his metrics are slightly negative. And yeah, Witt Jr. is not only better, he might be the best defender in baseball too. So they're both great, both way, always, and both deserving, and that's why it's a tough one. I'll ask you another tough one. Of course, I picked the Orioles and the Dodgers. They're both very, very injured right now, so I doubt they're the choice. I'll go right to the big question: who are the World Series favorites right now? Who's going to win if you were that pick?
Well, John, you also picked the Mets to make the playoffs. So
well, yeah, I know.
That's looking good.
I pat myself on the back every day about that, but it might, it might be.
Do you pat yourself on the back with the hand you were hedging with on the show a whole bunch of times, also?
Yeah, no, both. Yeah, both. I use both. I've been out doing a lot of patting, so I don't do rooting now. I got my fingers crossed on this one.
Well, World Series, I don't know. As everyone has said, it's going to be wide open, and I would not be surprised by literally any outcome. I do see it right now as the Astros to lose in the American League. I know they have the third worst or the third best record among the division winners, but I don't care. They were terrible early. They've come on. Their rotation is good right now. They've got a great back end of the bullpen. And my gosh, they've shown us time and time again that you can't knock them out very easily. The Yankees are capable of getting there. The Guardians, I have a hard time seeing them get there because of their starting pitching. It's just too thin. In the National League, it's even more wide open, and I don't have a good feel there at all. I sort of like the Padres, and I also can see the Phillies being the favorite here. The Phillies are clearly the chalk, but the Phillies are a team that has gone in and out at times this year as well, and it seems to me they're playing better again. They're kind of getting their mojo back. But I don't know. San Diego, to me, has a certain vibe about it. And I don't understand why. I wrote about this last week, actually. This is in my opinion, Preller's best season, his best series of moves. But why is this team so much better than last year's team when last year's team had Juan Soto, Josh Hader, and a bunch of other guys who were really good, including Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha? It's mind-boggling. Can't just be the manager, can't just be Soto leaving, but that team with Dylan Cease at the top, Michael King, Yu Darvish now, and Joe Musgrove, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's impressive. Look, I'll throw in one other thing just to close the loop on something. I actually watching Judge a lot this year. I think the key thing is he pulls up at the wall now. Like a lot of balls land over his head. By the way, that's what he should do. They ruined their season last year, him chasing a ball into the
Right.
wall. So, like, chase him in October, but don't ruin your season before then. Ken, let's stick with the Padres. I read your column. Obviously, Preller is, like the most, when you're this much more aggressive than Dave Dombrowski or Alex Anthopoulos, you're really something. Do you think if they do what you just said, which is either just go to or win their first ever World Series, other executives might go, you know what? Moneyball is about the taking advantage of areas other teams aren't taking advantage of. I think Preller has taken advantage of. People are afraid to trade prospects, and he's not. And if they were to win, does that move a sport that is overly cautious and move any other executives to say, you know what? Let's stop trying to win the Baseball America best organizational prospect ranking and like congratulating each other for like, oh, you got 2.2 in this trade and they only got 1.9. I know the answer is going to be no, but go ahead. I'm throwing it out there. Just it's a follow me sport.
It is. And certainly his style would be welcome to those of us who cover the sport, to fans of the sport, because it's exciting. Now, the answer that executives would give, I think, and I'm sure you guys have heard this from talking to different executives, is okay, this is fine, but talk to me in 3 or 4 years when these contracts come due, and certainly in 7 or 8 years in some cases. That's a fair assessment. It is. They're going to have, in my view, a problem at some point with this group. But the idea is to win the World Series. And my gosh, when you turn on a game on TV in San Diego, or when you cover a game in San Diego now, when you attend a game in San Diego, the atmosphere there is absolutely electric. He's turned the whole world around in that kind of way with
And
the
that has great
Padres.
value too.
That
Like
does
that,
have great value.
by the
And
way, it's okay to turn on your fan base. I hear all these arguments about Dave Dombrowski also, Ken. Dave Dombrowski's
yep.
teams win. Who cares what's going to be in 5 years? Like Jim Crane's team is beat up for trading all their prospects. They might go to a eighth straight ALCS. This is the greatest era in national history. Can teams try to win in the major leagues? The Royals are doing it. Look what's happening there.
Well, I totally agree. And I wrote about this a few weeks ago where I think I named 6 or 7 teams that need to try harder. And it's interesting. I just wrote about the Detroit Tigers today. How hard are they going to try this offseason? They've had this great run here. It's been amazing. They are a team with a chance to reach the postseason. They need to do some stuff. They have a very low payroll commitment for next year. They can really open things up. But, oh, we have to make the right decisions. You know what you're going to hear. And certainly, for every Kansas City that did all of that last offseason and did it brilliantly, there's a Cincinnati that flubbed and spent over 100 million and they're sub 500 again. So there's always going to be the cautionary tales. But look at the bullpen market at the deadline. Jason Adam and Tanner Scott were two of the 3, 4 best guys out there. Estevez was in there as well. He got two of them. He got two of those guys. Now he gave up a lot. There's no question. But the Orioles, just contrast what Preller did, they end up with Gregory Soto and Sir Anthony Dominguez. Now, Dominguez has done okay. He's closed for them, and it's been okay. Soto, not okay, and it's not enough. Now, their offense is the biggest problem. If you want to talk about the Orioles, that's been the issue in the last 2 months or so, more than anything. But again, Preller trumped the industry here. And listen, I've been hard on him in the past. Dennis Lynn and I, each of the last 2 seasons, wrote these long takedowns of how he runs that team, his management style. But got to give credit where credit is due. This is a team that really has a chance and is electrified at City. And Joel, you're right. What else do you want?
Before I get to my question, I had a couple notes on that. Very good point about it. Lugo is also was on the Padres last year. One guy you left out was Snell.
Yeah,
They did
yeah.
Snell on the team too. And I thought it was interesting that you said Padres and Phillies, and in the American League you said Astros. I was on a show recently. I had the same answer. I said the Astros, and I said Padres and Phillies. I do, and I'm glad you mentioned the Yankees because I think they're right there with the Astros. Both have a great rotation. So very interesting answers. I'm going to go the other way, and I'm with you, both you guys on Preller on what a terrific job he did. And as another footnote to that, they already had the best closer in the National League in Suarez when they got those two great
Right.
relievers. So, there were other teams that needed relievers a little bit more than they did, and they ended up getting two great ones in Adam and Scott. I'm going to go the other way. White Sox. What can we do about the White Sox? Does the commission? I mean, we've never covered any team that's like this. I mean, I know that the Tigers in 2003 were terrible. They did rally and avoided any part of the Mets record. I mean, I know the White Sox have won a couple games lately. They're not going to do it. Is there anything that baseball should do about them? Anything that they can do to fix this? And how many years is this going to take?
It's going to take a while. And when you're in a hole this deep, it doesn't happen overnight. We all know this. So, one thing I want to point out about the White Sox, I said this on the broadcast last week. They're bad. I don't know that they needed to be this bad. And here are some examples. Romy Gonzalez, he's playing for the Red Sox. He's been a kind of a super utility guy, had a pretty good year. They let him go. He was a guy that got bumped off the roster a little bit after they made the Bummer trade, and the Bummer trade clogged up their roster. And in that trade, Chris Getz acquired a couple of guys that are probably going to get non-tendered. So that's one thing. There are two guys in the Yankees bullpen, the New York Yankees bullpen, the team that is going to win the AL East and may go to the World Series. Tim Hill and Jake Cousins. Cousins was the guy they traded
Three
for
guys, Ken. Don't
cash.
forget Ian Hamilton last year.
Oh, Ian Hamilton last year. Okay, I'm just talking about this year, but you're
Yeah, but
right.
I mean, Hamilton's a controllable player.
Yeah.
They gave him away for nothing.
And all right, and those two guys as well. So, I mean, what are we doing here? And to me, it just didn't have to be this bad. Now, it's bad and it was going to be bad. And a lot of reasons for that. We can go into them. But to come out of this, I don't know, man. It's going to take a while. And listen, I don't know that they did the right thing holding on to Crochet. I don't know that they did the wrong thing. We're going to find out, right? And the other trade, the one at the deadline, the Fedde Pham Kopech trade, that was one where it was mind-boggling to see three guys in demand. Those guys were all in some degree of demand, and they traded them for Miguel Vargas and two prospects that aren't even in their top 10, according to MLB.com. Maybe it turns out well. It's hard to judge these things in the moment, of course, but I'm not sure they're necessarily on the right track here.
Ken, as we mentioned earlier, you're at Phillies and Mets on Thursday night for Fox. As we're speaking, Monday night, the Mets called a team meeting. David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza to go over. They were losing their most important on and off the field player in Lindor for a little while, and maybe more than a little while. They spoke. Alonso spoke also. He was the only other person who spoke. It was a reminder to me. I talked to him about it yesterday, about his upcoming free agency, and he answered it all the right ways. Love to be here, not thinking about it, the stuff that you get from the script from your management group to say. I think of him as the most fascinating free agent coming up because you could convince me he's a guy like he is a Boris client, like say Chapman or Snell or Montgomery, like chases something and gets trapped this offseason at a much lower number. Or you could tell me team like Seattle, San Francisco was like, hey, man, we need offense. We need a guy who could get the ball out of the ballpark and create threats, and he gets a big number. What do you think about his free agency going into this offseason? Because it's going to be one of the biggest stories. Juan Soto's getting whatever. Like, whatever, it's a big number. What do you think? What do you think about Alonso's?
Well, first off, Joel, that was a good scoop yesterday. You getting
Thanks.
that news that he spoke at that meeting. And that was beyond simply the news of it, which was interesting in itself. The implications of it to me were really interesting. And here's why. We think of David Stearns as kind of a cold, calculating guy, and he is. And that's how he's going to run the team. But here's a guy yesterday, or 2 days ago, whenever that meeting was.
Monday, yeah.
Monday, who spoke up at a time when he's 2 or 3 weeks away from being a free agent, or whatever it's going to be, 6 weeks away, and showed how much the team meant to him. And there's a value in that. Now, I know a lot of executives don't place that much value in it, and I'm not sure how much value David Stearns places in it, but that meant something, in my opinion. And that goes beyond the pure numbers. And I know they've been down a little bit this year, and the defense is never going to be great. But this guy has thrived in New York. He understands what it means to play in New York. He has been a leader in New York. To me, that should influence the Mets thinking somewhat. Now, as a free agent, I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't know how it's going to go. And if he overestimates his value and Scott Boras overestimates his value, he may run into the same problems that the Boras Four did last year. But at the same time, if not, then Joel, you're absolutely right. A Seattle, a San Francisco, a Detroit, any
Boston,
number
which
of
needs
teams.
right-handed power
Boston,
badly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Any number of teams should want Pete Alonso. Is he a perfect player? No, he's not. There are very few of those. I would say more deserving of love than necessarily he will get in the market. He's a guy that has shown a lot in terms of what he can bring intangibly to a team. And that matters. It matters to me. I don't know that it matters to most general managers.
Aaron Boone. Should he have to win? Does he have to win to remain the Yankee manager?
It's a better question for you guys. But
Well, we already gave our thoughts on our
okay.
earlier.
I would say if he doesn't win, let's say he doesn't get to the ALCS, let's leave it in those terms, then there's going to be noise. And there's going to be frustration, not just with Boone, but with Cashman too. And what's interesting to me, and Joel, I think you touched on this in a column you wrote recently, or maybe a podcast, I can't remember. The way they play the game, it's not clean. And it's been curious to me that they have not been a cleaner team, that they've been so sloppy. And that does reflect on the manager. There's no question about it. And if they don't win and it continues through the playoffs, and maybe it won't, maybe they'll clean it up, then you can say, well, where are we going here? And what's going on? Why isn't the team more crisp on the field than it has been? We'll see how it plays out. But if they don't win, certainly the questions will be asked. And we've seen the Yankees, they value this stability. And I don't know that I would bet on a change in the manager, and certainly not the general manager. But again, if they get knocked out quick again, there are going to be some questions asked, no question.
Yeah, Ken, to me, that there's sometimes where you have the most talent, and I think in the American League, the Yankees have the most talent, and you stand away and you Joe Torre the team and say, I'm going to write the same guys in the lineup, and I've got Mariano Rivera at the end, and I've got four high-end starters, and let's not overcomplicate this. I actually think with this team, he needs to be more activist, especially in the playoffs, and he should have been more activist along the way because they lose their minds playing on the bases where they're the worst in the sport in every metric, and defensively where they get absent-minded. I wonder if I could flip over on the other side of town. It's not an easy job. Mendoza seems to be handling this great. Doing. I think he's going to be in the conversation, maybe with Pat Murphy, Mike Schilt, a few others. It's really good jobs this year. We know that's a narrative award usually. What do you think of the job Carlos Mendoza does? Because again, you'll be there Thursday night for Fox.
First off, one more thought on Boone. You say he's not activist, Joe, enough. That's been the criticism for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
That this is not a new thing. So that would be
He's going to really have to manage this team in the postseason, Ken, because they have places where guys need to be run for, defend for, and he needs to manipulate a bullpen without a traditional closer. As much talent as they have, he needs to manage this team in October.
No, I totally agree with that. Now, on to Mendoza. I've been impressed from the start. I was impressed with him as a Yankees bench coach. You never know if a guy is going to succeed as a manager. I'm always suspicious of first-time managers. I have, because of my history in Baltimore, some emotional scars from covering first-time managers who did not do so well. So it kind of has stayed with me. But there's no question, while you can question certain moves here and there, like any manager, and I know there was a period there where some of the bullpen moves were in question because they were struggling to find healthy, adequate relievers. He has a presence about him, a way about him, and strategically also, he seems to be on it. So, yes, that manager of the year race in the National League is very interesting with the guys you mentioned, Murphy, certainly. and Schilt. To me, Murphy's the favorite.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Mendoza, he has shown that he can do this and he can do it at a high level and do it in a pressurized environment that is not like Matt Quatraro had in Kansas City when he started, just to use one example. And he's done a great job too. So, yes, I love what I've seen from Carlos Mendoza, and it's not easy to hit on these choices. You never know when that guy gets in the chair, how he's going to react. And it seemed like with Mendoza, you kind of did know. It's who he is. This is him. He's a shrewd baseball person. He's very smart, and he has a demeanor that seems to be well suited for the job.
Well, I'll admit, I didn't know with Mendoza. I think he's been great. I agree with you guys. I do think Murphy, not just because he's a friend of the show, Mendoza also is on the show. I think Murphy and Vogt will win this year because it's based on what the expectations were versus
Right.
what they actually did. So I think they're probably the winners. I got more of a big picture type question about the starting pitching. I saw a story, I think it was on one of our competitors, ESPN, about legislating at least 6 innings for a starting pitcher. Not because it was on ESPN. I think that idea is ridiculous. So I want to ask you what your thoughts are. How about just eliminate the opener? Let's not have any openers, because I think when people go to the games, I know that when I was a kid, I wanted to know who the starting pitcher was, and I was interested in who it was. And even if it wasn't Tom Seaver, it was still going to be somebody I'm going to see. So that would be my guess to that. And also, since we're talking starting pitching there, do you have any idea what the answer is, why so many of the great starting pitchers are hurt this year, and what can be done about that?
To the first question, restoring the prominence of the starting pitcher. Jason Stark and I wrote about this in May, and there are a lot of ideas out there. I guess the 6 inning thing is one of them. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know the rule, the magic bullet that will help this problem along. I do think the double hook idea where you tie it to the DH is logical, and that would be a start. That said, while I don't know the answer, baseball needs to figure out the answer because, John, you're absolutely right. The best days at the ballpark, in my opinion, are the days when you can think to yourself, okay, I've got Dylan Cease and Imanaga going against each other, just to pick two guys, Skeens and pick a number. So those are the best days. Bullpen days do not equate in that same way for fans. They do not resonate in that same way. And beyond that, in terms of keeping pitchers healthy, which is kind of the second question, if you restore the prominence of the starting pitcher, I think you get a better chance of doing that too. Because if a starter is going deeper into games, then maybe he's not throwing every pitch max effort, and maybe you don't have to use your bullpen as hard. Now, again, these are oversimplifications in a very large way, but at the same time, there has to be a better way. This is ridiculous what's going on. The Dodgers are absurd with the pitching that they've run out there and run down and broken down. It's ridiculous that teams are not in position or not able to keep pitchers healthy, starting pitchers healthy in a better way. I can name other teams too. Tampa Bay, Baltimore, to a certain extent with Grayson Rodriguez, they've missed him terribly. I don't know the answers, but someone really smart in MLB's offices, maybe a bunch of someone's, need to figure this out, or at least come up with some ideas to try. You can always go back. Nothing is set in stone, but what we have now is not good. It's inadequate. It's hurting the game, hurting the product, and it needs to be fixed.
And Ken, look, I think it's part of the brew because of how guys throw. Why we're looking at a year where I think there's 8 guys hitting over 300, which would be tied for second for the fewest ever. The batting average is 244 in the league, which is down 4 points from last year when they changed rules to try to juice up batting average. If we don't do something to change how the ball is thrown so consistently hard with so much spin by so many different people in the course of a game, I'm not sure that we could fix that. Let me get out of here with another big picture question. Ken, I don't think there's anybody who does more better than you in the industry. I hate to go Andrew Marchand. I love to go Andrew Marchand because I love when he tells me to stay in my lane. What with everything you do, why are you still doing so much? Why are you doing this? Like what's the fuel and fueling you daily? You've got the team made. you could go into the right lane and coast here. What's getting you up in the morning and making you do this? And eat your heart out, Andrew Marchand.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll throw the same question back at you guys, but my answer would be just that I like it. And I know how our industry is and how it can be really fleeting. We've all kind of experienced that at various points in various parts of our careers. Everyone experiences it, it seems. And my feeling is kind of like a player, not that I would compare myself ever to a player, but a player who says they're going to have to tear the uniform off me. That's kind of how I feel. Now, that said, I hope if there comes a point where the uniform needs to come off because maybe I'm not as sharp as I once was, then I will be smart enough and self-aware enough to take it off. But that's kind of my feeling. I remember, man, this was easily 30 years ago, I guess, or maybe less. I was lucky at that time. I don't know where I was, but I was on the Jim Rome show. And Jim Rome, this was out in LA. It was a TV show. I think he was doing it at Fox's studio, but it was before I was at Fox. And that's what he said to me. He said, "Hey, man, I'll do this as long as they let me." And that's kind of my feeling. Now you guys answer the question. Let's hear it.
I want to say something about you first, and we can edit this out if you don't like me saying this. But first of all, I think you're the best in the business and the hardest working. Uh, Secondly, I mean, I think you're finally getting paid something close to what you're worth. And the reason I know you weren't paid what you were worth is you tried to get me a job with the Baltimore Sun about 30 years ago. And I went for an interview with Jack Gibbons, who was a great guy and a great sportsman, and he hired great people there. Your coverage was always the best. Hard to believe in Baltimore, the best. And I remember, and he offered me the job, thanks to you. And then he told me what I was making. And I said, I can't come for that. I'm in New York. I'm not used to that kind of a salary. And he said, that's more than our columnist makes. And that was you. You made less than this figure that I wouldn't even think about. So I'm glad you're finally getting paid somewhat close to what you're worth, but you are the best. And I hope you don't mind me telling that story.
Well, John, thank you. And that is very funny because what I was paid in Baltimore was a sticking point. It was very
It's
frustrating.
unbelievable. I mention
Yeah.
it now, but I don't. It's unbelievable.
Do we all have this in common? I got offered a job at the Baltimore Sun, but it was by Randy Harvey was there, I think, was the sports head. Was that his name? He
Yeah,
came from the LA
yeah.
Times.
Mhm.
He offered. My then wife was a professor at the University of Maryland, and I was considering like, should we relocate down there? And again, for the same reasons as John, I understand the cost of living is different between New York and Baltimore, but it just couldn't be done. Ken,
Well, to
the
be
answer,
honest, guys, that's one reason I left. There were other reasons as well,
yeah, yeah,
but that was one reason because I wasn't really making it there.
yeah.
We had three kids, and I'm not saying I needed to be rich, but I needed more than I was getting there. And I don't want to overstate it either. I wasn't like getting paid pennies,
Mhm.
but commensurate to what it should have been, not so.
Yeah. Well, no matter what happens, Juan Soto and Pete Alonso are going to do better than all of
That's
us
very true. You
combined
guys haven't
this.
answered the
So,
question. You ducked the question.
I won't duck the question. You and I have talked about this in the past. It's not a simple answer for me. The answer is mainly a fear-based one, which is I kind of like the fray. I kind of like being good at something, and I'm terrified that the day I stop doing it, I have nothing but regret that I stepped out of it. I'm not a hobby guy. I don't golf. I don't tennis. I don't collect anything. I kind of overwork to fill my time. And the second I stop, I'm afraid it's going to be the last scene in Goodfellas where where he's in witness protection, Henry Hill, and he's in his driveway in the robe, and he picks up the paper and says, one time we were the kings of the city, and now I'm a schmuck like everybody else. And I'm just afraid to be in my bathrobe in the driveway picking up a newspaper saying, I don't know what to do today. At
That's
least when I do this with as many different platforms as John and I both work on and you work on, there's a reason to get out of bed every day. There's a challenge of trying to be better than the best, which I agree with John. To flatter you, honestly, you're the best. You're the standard that we're shooting for to try to work as hard as and produce as much quality work. And when you're competitive and competing, there's a reason to get out of bed in the morning to try to do better than yesterday and see if you can strive closer to perfect. And by the way, do good reporting at a time where people crap all over our
Yes.
business by doing good, hard, honest, moral reporting.
Yeah,
John?
I don't golf. I do play tennis, but now that I'm 63, I can only last for about half an hour, 40 minutes. That won't take up the day. So I do like doing this. So I keep doing this, and I'm here in Glenview, Illinois. We just dropped my daughter off at college, so I have a young daughter, even though I'm not that young myself, and it does pay the bills. So and the New York Post doesn't pay like the Baltimore Sun. So I'm glad to
You know
see
what,
that.
guys? We should all mention this too. We don't really have anything else to do. We're not capable of doing anything else. That's
Yeah.
part of the issue here. Joel kind of touched on it, but
Right.
again, what are we going to do if we're not doing this? We love doing this, so we continue.
Yeah, look, I'll quote another movie. I love the movies. That's kind of my hobby. I love going. Is in Heat when Al Pacino tells his ex-wife, she's saying, "Can we get back together?" And he says, "You know me. All I am is what I'm going after at that moment."
Yeah,
Like, like we're all daily newspaper guys to some degree, even when we're doing something else. So we're all what we're going after in that moment.
agreed. Amen.
So, Ken, I didn't know we were going to go down this path. I'm glad we went down
Sorry.
it with you. And I know John and I are sincere in it. You're the best, and you're a great friend. And thank you for joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and John
Well,
Hayes.
you guys are too kind, and honestly, to be in the same business with you both and some others too, right? That's kind of cool. That's really cool for
That's
me, and
nice.
it's an
Thank
honor,
you.
honestly. So
Yep.
thank you,
All the best, Ken.
you two guys.
John and I, of course, thank our friend Ken Rosenthal. John, hit or error?
I'm going to give a hit to the Tigers and the Mariners for somehow, some way getting in that race. Detroit became a seller. Seattle fired its manager, and yet they are in the race right now, and that is not easy to do. Give Detroit's young kids credit. I mean, they traded Flaherty. You can look back on and say maybe it was a mistake, but I don't know. They ended up with Sweeney, who was at one time a Yankee prospect shortstop, who I think is going to be really good. Had gone to the Dodgers in another trade, but I think they made good trades and they're in the race now. So I give Detroit credit. And Seattle, same thing. I thought they were dead in the water. They fired their manager not because they thought they were going to spark their way to the title or anything like that, but they have improved and they are in the race.
Yeah, it's hard to have the pitching the Mariners have had the last 2 years and not get in the playoffs, and that's still the likely outcome. John, I'm actually doing a U-turn. I had something else I was going to do for hit or error, but because you mentioned Seattle and Detroit, I'll do the error on the other thing. They're in the race because the Twins are falling like a bag of rocks through the air. And I think they're falling because they saw their problem coming hard in the offseason, in spring training, and at the trade deadline, and they didn't fix it. And, do you want to blame the RSN situation that they didn't want to add
Yeah.
money, whatever? They were always going to be a starting pitcher short. And once Joe Ryan and Chris Paddock got hurt, they didn't get Flaherty. They didn't get Eflin. They didn't, what they do? Trevor Richards, and then they DFA'd him a week later. So that was problem one. And the other is just a structural one. And I use the term structural not as a pun, but if you're going to build your team around Buxton, Correa, and Lewis, you're in trouble. Buxton and Correa are their two highest paid guys by a lot. They take up a lot of their payroll. These guys just don't get on the field, and they don't get on the field together. Right now, Buxton 93 games, Correa 77, Lewis 70. And by the way, Buxton and Correa are back, and they have to nurse them the last 10 days of the season. They might not play every day because of their injuries. I just don't know how that team fires fully ever if they don't commit to do something about improving overall starting pitching, and if they don't kind of like figure out some more players to put around those three, because as talented as they are, when the three of them are on the field and healthy, those are well above average baseball players, but man, they just don't get on the field together.
Yeah, I mean, you said it was the RSN. I mean, this is not a major market. I mean, it's not the smallest market either, and they had financial issues. I think they spend reasonably. The owner does a fair job of trying to win there. So I kind of got it when they cut back this winter and didn't do much. Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice if they'd come up with Flaherty or Eflin. Certainly, Yankees passed on Flaherty due to the back situation, which, I mean, he only has to last another few months. So I don't know what his back situation was, but he's certainly doing it.
Well, that would have given the Yankees 7 starting pitchers then.
Yeah, I know. They didn't need him. Right. The Twins could have used it, but it was a complete seller's market. There were two guys who've now done well. I guess you could say that Savali and Montas have done okay for Milwaukee as well. So, yeah, I mean, they're in this situation because they did cut back. I do think they have the RSN excuse, and there is concern. I mean, if they blow it, this will be a bad one in Minnesota. They should still get in, but no guarantees at this point.
No guarantees. One guarantee is that our producer, Tommy Hogan, will always do an excellent job and always help us through with this show. That you can find us on our YouTube page, the New York Post Sports YouTube page, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate and review us. John and I always appreciate that. John, next week is our final regular season show of the 2024 season. Man, it goes fast. The journey's been great. We hope everyone continues to stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.